On a March night in 1964, a young woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment building in Queens, New York. The assault lasted more than half an hour. She screamed, she called out for help, lights came on in nearby windows, and according to the story that swept through American newspapers in the days that followed, 38 people watched or heard what was happening, and not one of them called the police in time to save her. That number, 38, became a kind of national wound. It seemed to prove something terrible about human beings, that we are, underneath our decency, capable of watching a stranger die and doing nothing. But here is the twist almost nobody knows. That number was probably wrong. Later investigations found the original reporting exaggerated how many people actually saw the attack, and some who did hear something did call for help. The myth of the 38 silent witnesses was, in part, a piece of journalism that outran the facts. And yet, strangely, the myth accidentally led two psychologists to discover something that turned out to be completely real, something far stranger than the story itself, something that still governs your behavior today in ways you have almost certainly never noticed. This is the story of why good people fail to help, not because they are cruel, not because they don't care, but because of a hidden switch in the human mind that flips off exactly when we need it most. Two social psychologists, John Darley and Bib Latane, read about the Genovese case and found themselves disagreeing with the explanation everyone else had settled on. The popular theory was that city life had made people numb, that anonymity and crowding had eroded some basic human instinct toward compassion. Darley and Latane thought this was too easy. They suspected the truth wasn't about apathy at all. They suspected it was about arithmetic. So they built an experiment to test it, and what they found would become one of the most replicated, most unsettling discoveries in the history of psychology. Here's how it worked. A college student would sit alone in a room, wearing headphones, believing they were part of a discussion about the personal problems of college life. They were told they'd be speaking with other students over the intercom, one at a time, because the topic was sensitive and people might feel embarrassed being watched. In reality, there were no other students. Every other voice was a recording. Partway through the discussion, one of those recorded voices began to stammer, then gasp, then say the words that changed everything. He was having a seizure. He needed help. He was going to die. The question was simple. Would the listening student get up and get help? Here is what Darley and Latane found. When the participant believed they were the only person who could hear the emergency, nearly all of them, around 85%, rushed to help almost immediately. But when participants believed there were 4 other people also listening in, that number collapsed. Fewer than a third of them responded within the critical window. Some never went for help at all, even as the recorded voice fell silent. Nothing about the emergency had changed. The seizure was identical. The screams were identical. The only thing that changed was a number in the participant's head, a number representing how many other people might also be responsible. Darley and Latane called this diffusion of responsibility, and it works exactly like it sounds. When one person witnesses an emergency alone, the full weight of moral obligation lands on them entirely. There is no one else to share it with. But the moment a person believes others are also present, that weight gets divided, like a bill split among diners at a table. Except unlike a real bill, nobody adds it up afterward. Everyone simply assumes someone else is already covering it, or already has. This is not a flaw found only in cowards. It appeared in ordinary students who, when interviewed afterward, were often shaking, sweating, clearly distressed by the recording. They weren't indifferent. Many of them agonized, but their bodies froze while their minds performed an invisible calculation. Someone else is probably already calling for help. But diffusion of responsibility was only the first piece of the puzzle. Darley and Latane discovered something even stranger buried inside human decision-making, something that explains why bystanders don't just fail to act, but often fail to even recognize an emergency as an emergency in the first place. They called it pluralistic ignorance, and it might be the most important psychological concept most people have never heard of. Picture a smoke-filled room, literally. In one experiment, participants sat in a waiting room, ostensibly filling out a questionnaire, when smoke began pouring in through a vent. When a person was alone in the room, the vast majority reported the smoke almost immediately, often within 2 minutes. But when 3 participants sat together, and 2 of them were secretly instructed to stay perfectly calm and simply glance at the smoke and go back to their paperwork, something remarkable happened. The one real participant, watching everyone else's apparent calm, usually did nothing. Some sat there for over 6 minutes while the room grew hazy enough that they had to wave smoke away from their faces to keep writing. Afterward, when asked why they hadn't reacted, they didn't say they thought it was safe. They said things like they assumed it was steam from the air conditioning, or a special effect for the experiment, or nothing worth mentioning.
Here is the hidden mechanism. In an ambiguous situation, human beings instinctively look to others to figure out how to interpret what's happening. This is a normally useful shortcut. If everyone around you is calm, that's usually good evidence that things are fine. The trouble is that everyone else is doing the exact same calculation, watching your face for a cue just as you're watching theirs. And if everyone is trying to appear calm so as not to overreact, the room fills up with people silently reading each other's calm expressions as proof that nothing is wrong, when in reality, every single person might be secretly alarmed and simply hiding it. Psychologists have a name for this particular flavor of misunderstanding. It's a state where a group of individuals privately reject a norm, but assume, incorrectly, that everyone else accepts it, because everyone is performing acceptance out of the same fear of standing out. Pluralistic ignorance shows up far beyond emergencies. It's part of why students in a lecture hall might all be equally confused by a concept, but nobody raises a hand, each one assuming they must be the only one who doesn't understand, when in truth the entire room is quietly lost together. So now the picture starts to widen. It isn't only that responsibility gets diluted among witnesses, it's that the presence of other people changes whether we even perceive an event as an emergency in the first place. 2 invisible processes stacked on top of each other, both working in the same direction, toward inaction. But there's a third layer to this, one that Latane and Darley identified with almost surgical precision, and it might be the most psychologically revealing piece of all. They called it evaluation apprehension, though you might know its more everyday name, the fear of looking like a fool. Imagine you're at a park and you see someone lying motionless on a bench. Is he asleep? Is he unconscious? Is he having a medical emergency? If you rush over and shake him and he simply wakes up annoyed, you've made a scene, embarrassed yourself, and violated the unwritten social rule that says don't touch strangers or interrupt them without a very good reason. Every bystander performs this same silent risk calculation, often in less than a second, weighing the danger of underreacting against the humiliation of overreacting. And in ambiguous situations, humiliation often wins, because humiliation is certain and immediate, while the emergency is only a possibility. This is why, across dozens of follow-up studies, the single biggest predictor of whether someone helps in an emergency isn't their personality, their morals, or even how much empathy they claim to feel. It's the number of other bystanders present. Researchers even gave this its own term, one that sounds almost too clean to be true. The bystander effect states that an individual's likelihood of helping decreases as the number of other bystanders increases. Not decreases a little, In some experimental setups, the presence of just one additional bystander can cut the odds of intervention by more than half. Which raises an unsettling question. If this pattern is so consistent, so measurable, so predictable, why doesn't anyone warn people about it? Why isn't this taught the way we teach children to look both ways before crossing the street? It turns out someone did try, and what happened next revealed something almost as fascinating as the bystander effect itself: the psychology of the fix. Darley and Latany didn't stop at diagnosing the problem. They wanted to know whether simply telling people about diffusion of responsibility could break its spell. Later researchers tested exactly this. They had participants listen to a lecture explaining the Genovese case and the psychology behind bystander inaction. Weeks later, without any mention of the earlier lecture, those same participants were placed in a staged emergency, a person appearing to collapse or need assistance in a hallway. Those who had heard the lecture were significantly more likely to help than those who hadn't, even though the emergency had nothing to do with the lecture's topic on the surface. Simply knowing that the mind performs this calculation, that responsibility silently diffuses in a crowd, seemed to interrupt the automatic process. Awareness itself functioned like a kind of psychological vaccine. This detail matters enormously because it means the bystander effect is not some fixed law of human nature like gravity. It's closer to an optical illusion. Once you understand exactly how it tricks you, it becomes far harder for it to trick you the same way twice. Now here's where the story gets even more layered, because the bystander effect doesn't only apply to physical emergencies. It quietly governs an entire category of modern life that most people never think to examine through this lens. Consider the workplace. An employee notices financial irregularities, or witnesses a colleague being harassed, or spots a serious safety violation. If they're the only one who seems to have noticed, they usually act. But if the wrong behavior is happening in plain view of an entire office, in front of dozens of coworkers who are also saying nothing, each individual quietly assumes that someone with more authority, more information, or more courage must be handling it. Compliance investigators and workplace psychologists have long recognized this pattern in cases of corporate misconduct that persisted for years despite being visible to many employees. It wasn't secrecy that protected the wrongdoing, it was diffusion, operating exactly the way it does in a crowd on a street corner, just wearing a suit. Consider social media. When a public figure posts something false, cruel, or dangerous, and it spreads to millions of viewers, individual users often assume that with so many eyes on the post, someone, a moderator, a journalist, a more qualified voice, must be addressing it. The sheer size of the audience creates the same diffusion effect Latany and Darley found in a room with 4 strangers, except now the room contains millions of strangers, and the paralysis scales accordingly. Researchers studying online behavior have found that people are often less likely to intervene, correct misinformation, or offer help to someone expressing distress online precisely when the audience watching is largest, the exact inversion of what we'd instinctively expect. Consider even something as small as a car accident on the highway, where dozens of drivers slow down to look, assuming among the sea of witnesses, someone has surely already called for help. Emergency dispatchers have reported incidents where an accident sat for many minutes without a single call, each driver individually certain that with so many other cars passing, it wasn't their responsibility to be the one who dialed. The pattern is the same everywhere it appears. It is never about how many people are capable of helping. It is about how many people believe someone else already is. This leads to the single most important, most quietly disturbing insight in the entire psychology of the bystander effect, the one that should genuinely change how you interpret human behavior for the rest of your life. We tend to believe that morality is a fixed internal trait, that some people are simply good and others are simply indifferent, and that we can predict who will help in an emergency by looking at their character. but Latany and Darley's research suggests something far less comfortable and far more accurate. Whether a person helps in a crisis often has less to do with who they are and far more to do with the invisible architecture of the situation they happen to be standing in. Change the number of witnesses and you can flip a compassionate person into a frozen bystander or a hesitant person into a hero without changing anything about their character at all. This doesn't mean individual character is meaningless. It means character operates inside a situation, and the situation can either free that character to act or silently suppress it before the person even realizes a decision is being made. And this is precisely why the story of Kitty Genovese, even with its exaggerated numbers, produced something true and lasting out of something partly false. It forced psychologists to look past the comforting explanation, the idea that bystanders were simply bad people in a cold city, and discover something far more universal and far more useful, a hidden mechanism embedded in every one of us, one that has nothing to do with the size of the city and everything to do with the size of the crowd. So here is what all of this means for you, walking through your own life long after this video ends. The next time you witness something wrong, something confusing, something that might be an emergency, and you notice other people around who also seem unsure, remember what is actually happening in that moment. It is not that everyone else knows something you don't. It is not that your help isn't needed. It is that everyone present, including you, is caught in the exact same psychological trap. Each person's uncertainty reinforcing everyone else's. Each person's stillness read by others as proof that stillness is the correct response. The single most effective way researchers have found to break this cycle isn't courage in the abstract, it's specificity. If you ever need help in public and worry no one will step forward, don't shout for anyone. Point directly at one person and give them a specific task. You, in the red jacket, call an ambulance. In an instant, diffusion of responsibility disappears because responsibility is no longer shared among a crowd. It belongs to one named person.
If understanding the hidden psychology behind everyday behavior changes the way you see the world, consider subscribing. There are many more invisible forces shaping our decisions than most people ever realize. Quiet mechanisms running underneath ordinary moments, and we're only beginning to uncover them. Because the truth about the bystander effect is not that people are indifferent to suffering. It's that suffering witnessed in a crowd becomes strangely invisible, not because anyone stopped caring, but because everyone, silently, at the exact same moment, assumed someone else already did.